Okay, so Izzy, before pursuing your childhood dream to become a ninja and move to Japan, you were teaching in the States, and presumably, along with that, you had a fairly decent salary, and you were able to go out socializing and do the things that like a 20-something-year-old would want to do with their lives. And then you gave all of that up to do what probably a lot of people would call something quite silly, like pursue a silly dream, and maybe even they would say that it's less valuable, and that it would make you mean that you were less successful, whatever successful means. Um, and I was speaking to one of my blog readers recently, and she is struggling at the moment with her own work situation, and she was saying to me that she thought maybe she would be happier moving out of the role that she's in now into something like working in the cafe as a waitress. And she used this word, she said that her ego didn't allow her to think of that as something good enough. That she didn't think that it wasn't successful. She was somehow failing by doing that. And I wondered if, when you were making that decision and going through that process to leave your job and move to Japan, whether you experienced anything like that, whether your ego was saying, oh, but if I do this, I'm not going to be good enough, so I shouldn't. And just, did you experience anything like that, and how did you get past it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I first made the decision to leave my job as a middle school teacher back in America, I give a little story. I give a little analogy, a little metaphor that I'll explain explain
Mm-hmm.
how it works. So, story of there's a dog. It's sitting on the porch. There's two individuals sitting there, and the dog is whining. It's complaining, and guy's sitting there asks the owner, what's wrong with the dog? He goes, well, he's sitting on a nail. He goes, well, why doesn't he move? And the owner says, well, I guess the pain isn't strong enough yet. And so with me in my particular case, what happened is the pain became so strong and so intense that I didn't care. I stopped caring about what other people thought. And I remember the conversation I had with myself was basically, I've tried their way. I've tried it. Like I have now, I'm in the middle of getting a master's degree in education at the time. I have the fancy degrees. My resume looks great. My principal gave me very good reviews. And yet, when it came time to be at home by myself, with just me, I was completely unhappy. I was depressed. I was stressed. And so I think I was forced to come to that realization that it's like, I got to hang out with me 24/7. And if I don't have fun with myself and enjoy who I'm being with, something has to change.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with all that being said, so I was able to make that decision and move on and be able to do it fairly comfortably. But once I got to Japan, that's when the actual switch occurred. And I came to Japan, and I have a master's degree in education. I have 4 years of teaching experience in some of the toughest schools in Los Angeles, really in the United States. It's a very highly underperforming school. So I'm experienced and I've had very good training. And so I get to Japan, and I'm in the countryside, and I'm an assistant language teacher, and they give me no responsibility. I'm teaching on average a class a day, and when I go to the class, and I knew it was going to be easy, I knew it wouldn't be that difficult. That's why I chose the job, because I wanted to do it so I come to Japan to do martial arts. It was just a vehicle to make money. But when I started doing it, and I was just handed a textbook and told, here, Izzy Sensei, repeat these words, it was so difficult for me because I just felt like, what am I doing? I'm not contributing anything. I'm not actually giving anything. And so it was a battle. And I think what eventually I did because of that was I made the decision that I would fulfill my contract and then I would leave.
Yeah, it's very difficult, isn't it? Because I guess we really, as human beings, need to feel like we're using our skills and our potential to the maximum. Um, I think for me that's one of the biggest thing, and you feel like it's not about the job not being good enough in a way. It's just about what you're capable of and what you can do.
No, I think it's a great point, and it's especially because, how would I put it? I would say it's we not only want to feel what we do matters, we should feel that.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of when people start saying, "Well, I should just appreciate what I have," it's like, but if you don't, you don't, and don't use it. Don't use that as a cop out.
Yeah, as an excuse. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. And it's because we are capable of doing incredible things, mm-hmm. and so that yearning, that screaming inside of us, is for a reason. And it's because we can do it. And I think it needs to be listened to.
Mm-hmm. Before you left your job and you were teaching still, you had quite a lot. You had the salary, and presumably there were some benefits, and you had a lot. And similarly, before I left my job, I had everything that I thought I needed. I had money, and I had things, and I had clothes, and I could go out and I could do this, that, and the other, and it was all very wonderful. And a lot of the people that get in contact with me through the blog, they're also in a similar position, and they have everything and they can pay the bills, and it's great. And yet there's clearly a massive problem, because you were suffering, from anxiety and depression, and I know I was anxious most of the time. And it's like you say, it's okay when you're kind of at work and you're occupied, but you get home and you're just with yourself and you're like, oh my goodness, what is this? Is this my life? And where do you think that we've gone so wrong? How is it that so many of us have ended up in this situation where we have so much and we have everything that we thought we needed to be happy, and yet we're so unhappy? How did this happen?
Oh man, that's a darn good question. Yeah,
I'm glad I'm not the one answering it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a great question. My thoughts, I guess, my 2 cents on it is that I think that there's probably cultural impacts of this. I can speak from America's culture on this one. Mm-hmm. I would say that one of the things that we're taught in education is there's a right or a wrong answer, and that the answers are it's a 1, 2, 3 step formula. You got math, you have English. This is a good paper. This is a bad paper, and so one of the things that builds up is that if we move through time, it's simply, and we're taught from a very young age that, okay, well, you go through the field of education, get a job. So we're taught at a very young age these particular things, and then so we go through the system, and there's not actually that much communication really at all, unless your parents do it, about your character, mm-hmm. about who you are inside. And it's all these external things. So we naturally then begin to develop this concept with all of that, okay, well, if I get this job, I will be happy. Just like if I get an A in all my classes, I'll be happy. If I get to the highest level class, I'll be happy. I get to the good college, I'll be happy. And I get to good grades college, then I get the good job, I'll be happy. And then what happens is, then we do all those things, and because you're simply in reality just rolling the dice, and it's very low probability because there's a million things you can do, and you're simply just following this formula that's supposed to work but actually doesn't work. And then it's a roll of the dice, and if you happen to land on the right job, then it's great, but in most cases you're probably not going to. Then you're sitting there and you're like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? I did everything I'm supposed to do, yet I'm not happy. So it's something wrong with me. When in reality, there's nothing wrong with you. There's a problem with the formula. And so it's...
Yeah. That really strikes me, actually, what you say about feeling that there's something wrong with you. And I think I definitely felt that, and I'm sure a lot of people feel like that. And you turn inward and you think, what have I done? Why am I not happy? Why am I going through this? And you think it's somehow your fault. You've missed something, and actually it isn't necessarily your fault. It's just that we've been taught all these things that aren't necessarily going to bring us real happiness. And yeah, it's interesting. When I was preparing for this interview, I listened to an interview that you had done sort of late last year with Liz, I think, from A Life on Your Terms. Yeah. And it was a great interview. One of the things that really struck me that you said was that work is our greatest opportunity to give back to the world. And over this last year, since I left my job, I've definitely been through this process and this transition of it all being about me and what can I get? What do I need for myself? How can I make this work for me? To having this much stronger sense that it's about something bigger and about doing something for other people. And I know from listening to your interviews and reading a lot of your stuff that you've been through a similar process as well. And I just wondered if you could talk to us about going through that transition from it being about you to then having this greater sense of purpose and it being about more than you, and how that's changed the way you feel about yourself and the way you feel about your life and how happy you are.
I'm gonna start calling you the question machine. Yeah, these are great questions. So, yeah, I think that it's a process, and I think that what you're talking about, I guess what we both talk about, is this idea of to impact other people's lives. You're essentially leading them. You're a leader, and people are following what you say. But before you can ever lead anyone else, you have to start with one person, and the first person you have to begin leading is yourself. And I think the beginning of, I think there's always that kind of struggle that different people go through where it's sometimes people start trying to, I would say some people often they try to start helping the world too soon, where they actually need to step back and start helping themselves and really working on themselves, discovering themselves, growing, reading books, listening to audio programs, trying out new things, exploring different things in your own life. And then naturally, as you do that, you can begin to identify areas in which you're skilled to help others. And you'll be developing those skills along the process.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it starts with ourself. And then we can eventually, over time, we can begin to impact other people's lives. I feel like there were so many layers to that question.
Yeah, so I tend to do that with my questions. I tend to just like flood someone with about 15 questions and expect them to answer all of them. Yeah, so how do you, now that you have this sort of, I guess, a greater sense that what you're doing is about helping other people more. That's your, I don't know, would you say that that's, that's what you're about? That's why you do what you do with the blog, and it's about helping other people pursue their dreams. Would you say that's accurate, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, it is without a doubt very, very accurate. But there is also the other component to it that I cannot deny of it. I get immense growth out of it.
Of course.
I learn so much.
Of course. But I think they're kind of like, they go together, don't they? Would you get the same growth out of doing something that wasn't about helping other people in the same way? And so how does it feel to you in your life now to have this thing that you believe in so much and that you want to help people so much? Like, it comes from a really genuine place. I can tell that from what you write and from how you speak. Like, how does that make you? So this is a bit inarticulate, but it's because I went from, like, when I was at work, I had no sense of purpose or what I was for, really. And now I have a really strong sense of that. And it's growing all the time, but it's made my life feel so different. And I'm just wondering how it makes you feel in your life.
That's a great question. You know what I would say? It probably gives me peace. It gives me peace. I think that's probably the greatest impact it has on me.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really nice. Moving on. I don't know if have you heard of a guy called Dan Pink?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's written a couple books.
Yeah, he's written a couple of books, and I read one of them quite a while ago now, and it's about, he talks a lot about motivation and how we're kind of like motivation in business. and how the system that a lot of businesses use is essentially the carrot and the stick, and how it's very outdated and doesn't really work in motivating people, by offering them rewards or punishments. And it's an outdated system of motivation, and we need to change it. And he said that the three things that we need in life and in work to have the greatest amount of motivation for what we're doing, and I think essentially to have greater happiness in our lives, are autonomy, which he describes as, I'm going to have to refer to my notes, describes as the desire to direct our own lives, and then also mastery, which is the desire to get better and better at something that matters, and also purpose, which he describes as the yearning to do what we do, but in service of something that is larger than ourselves. And I was thinking about those three things, and it occurred to me that probably in what you're doing, and especially in your training in Aikido, you have a lot of those things, like the mastery and with your blog, the purpose, and I guess you're very autonomous in the way you direct your life now. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about how those things, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, come into your life in Japan, and how they affect you.
Yeah, yeah. That's a cool way to put it. I mean, I guess when I hear those three things, what I think of is it's like, okay, so we have purpose, so it's identify what you want, because that's purpose. Autonomy is to do it. So autonomy is actually doing it. And then mastery, the third thing, would be over time, where it's over time when you truly give yourself to this purpose and you take action, but over time you can gain mastery.
Mm-hmm.
I would say for me, I don't believe I have mastery. I think I'm much too young to say something like that. I think it'd be quite a tragedy if a 30-year-old would say such a thing.
They say 10 years, don't they? 10 years to master anything.
Yeah, unless you're a professional athlete. Professional athletes can have mastery at 30. They can do that.
Not an athlete.
But so in particular, like in Aikido, I do think it's every single day. It's going in and putting the work, and in a lot of ways. Someday I will have. Someday I hope to have that, but it's almost as if it's almost like doing it just for the sake of doing it, each and every day. But I want mastery in two areas. I want mastery in that area, but I also want mastery in impacting people in what I do with my blog. This isn't just something that, it's not just about Aikido. Aikido teaches me principles that I am able to apply to life, to my life, to other people's lives. And it allows me to take my life to a level and to learn humility, to learn how to learn, to learn follow through, to commit myself to each moment. And so, I guess that would be my response.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I think, you must have an incredible amount of discipline to train in something like that to the extent which you do. And yeah, I think it's amazing. Right, last question. So for me, to reach the point that I've reached today, a year on from leaving my job, and to have begun, I think, to understand that happiness isn't in financial gain or popularity or reaching a certain point, and that it's far more in kind of finding, it's like you said, finding peace with yourself and doing something that matters and contributing something to the world that I feel is important. But that process has taken a long time, and I'm sure, and it's ongoing as well, and I'm still learning, and I've got so much to learn, and I'm sure it's the same for you too. And a lot of the people that come and they contact me through the blog, I want to tell them, because they're at where I was at a year ago, and they want to leave their jobs and they want to find their thing, and I want to be able to say it's not about finding that thing, because I feel now it's about something different. It's all about this process and really discovering peace without needing anything. And and I think, but for everybody, they need to go on their own journey and their own process of doing that. There's no quick fix. You can't just be there. You have to go through all of this that you've been through, that I've been through, and so many other people have been through. But what most people seem to get stuck on and really struggle with is even getting started. And I know that you're really action oriented and you're all about getting started and taking steps. And so I just wanted to ask you as a final question what your best piece of advice would be for anybody who's in a job or in their life and, you know, they're struggling with it and it's not what they want and they want something more, but they just can't seem to get started. What would your advice be to them? Sorry.
Oh, it's a great question. I mean, I just think about it because it's so, you know, there's so much context that can come with that. I think what you have to, there's a question that you have to ask yourself, and it's what's holding me back? What's stopping me? And don't ask it with a negative tone or an aggressive tone. You ask it with an exploratory and a curious tone because you need to begin to develop curiosity if you're going to figure this stuff out. So it's just, what's holding me back? And, you know, I would write it on a piece of paper and just brainstorm and really reflect on it and go, because we all have different barriers. We have things that are holding us back. And sometimes, which is actually something you recently wrote about on your site, is what other people think about, what other people think about us. So there's that. But sometimes there's other things that it could be. It could be simply a fear of failure. Maybe it has something to do with a particular relationship. Maybe you're scared of going here. And it's I think fear, there's often a relationship between fear and something. But I think you got to explore that. You got to ask, what's holding me back? And then you can just ask a simple question of, all right, well, if I was going to start to conquer this fear, to move towards pushing past this fear, what would be the very first step in this process? And write this down. And then from there, okay, so now you've identified your major barrier and you've identified the first step. And now the hard part comes, and that's taking that first step. And I think you got to do it with a little bit of faith because there's all these voices in our head who will be like, well, okay, but if I take the first step, I don't even know what the second step is. What am I doing? It's like, yeah, but you know, to get to step 2, you do have to do step 1. And maybe, just maybe, possibly, it's worth a shot, and I'm very confident that it actually will turn out this way, but it's worth a shot is if you do step 1, you can probably figure out step 2. And then you can do that too.
Yeah.
And as you do that, taking action is a skill. It's something that a person develops over time. As you take more action, you can become better at it.
Yeah.
And I don't think people see it that way.
And yeah, you become more confident in it because you take some action and you see that something happens and you're like, oh, okay. And then you do something else and it does it just like it snowballs. It's really incredible. Izzy, amazing answers to my questions. Thank you, thank you so much.
Great questions. I asked great questions.
I asked some amazing questions there. Thank you.